All right, now, ladies and gentlemen, we are now with William Cluston, the leader of the SDP. So, William, welcome to the channel. How are you?
Good, thanks. And how are you?
Good, good. Yeah, last time we spoke on this channel, we had a lot of problems to discuss a while ago.
Mm.
But we focused on economic policies and everything else. So it seems like it's all kicking off on every front, and the main parties are failing us, and the media is not really doing proper reporting. And obviously, even Tousi TV, we get accused of being one-sided, just give platforms to all the economic right wingers. Actually, no, we also give platform to SDP to obviously have you guys on. You guys are obviously nationalists. You believe in patriotism, but of course, economically, you're more left-leaning. And every time I talk to you in person, you just make me more left wing. So
Yeah,
well,
good.
you have this power, but why is it that we are now in this mess, especially with all the divisions on the streets? The actual far left who are not technically actually they in the name of liberalism. They are using authoritarianism against us, and of course Islamism. And then you've got the other side, the mainstream parties failing. What do you think is going on?
I think we are reaping the results of 30, 40 years of two types, even three types of liberalism at the same time. So we've got economic liberalism, which has stripped our industry away. We've had a free trade ideology imposed on us, and our factories have closed, and basically production has been shipped abroad, mainly to Southeast Asia and China. So the China trade shock has had an effect. It's now very, very difficult to raise a family on a normal wage in the Midlands and the industrial towns of the north. And I've always argued that this trade policy that we've gone for, whatever benefits you were going to get from getting cheap goods from China, are massively outweighed by the fact now that some of these towns and cities, Hartlepool, Manchester, Birmingham, now have 20% of UK adults on out of work benefits. And so we are, because of that, sort of mopping up the blood, as it were, and having a high tax economy because of economic failure and the failure to trade properly. So we've got that mire, but we've also got, at the same time, as this crazy runaway liberalism, social liberalism, which has undermined the family and undermines the nation state and all the places basically that we come together to share. So you've got a situation where we're encouraged to be selfish and think of ourselves all the time, and obviously the ID politics is right up that street. It's all about me, me, me. But we've forgotten all about us. We've forgotten about the duties we have to each other, and that's what we've got to reinstill, basically. And that's why the SDP is a party of what I call the conservative left.
That's interesting. Obviously, on paper, you and I disagree when it comes to economic policies and all that. But having said that, I still agree with you in terms of the result of the governments and the parties when they have been implementing what you would call economic liberalism or free market capitalism and trade.
Mm.
I think we can still have the consensus that. Obviously, one day maybe I will convert you, or you fully convert me to the economic protectionism and all that. But actually, I still think that there is a way because you still believe in market economy, don't you? I mean, as a concept, you don't believe in
Massive,
communism. Yeah, but
yeah.
I think there could be a consensus to actually have it's a society that you look after your own industries first. I mean, I said this on this channel a couple of days ago. I said I believe in trade, but we have to be
Yeah.
pragmatic. For example, I mean, I made it simplified. I said if we can, for example, make this remote here,
Mm.
then don't buy it from someone else. If there's something you definitely can't build here or make here or grow here, then you can make an agreement with some country. And you mentioned China as a good example of basically rigging the system. And obviously, yeah, I mean, I agree with you when it comes to social
It's
liberalism and
not
all that stuff.
free trade, Maya. That's what I object to. It's not free trade. I mean, it's
Unfair.
not,
Yeah.
for a start, you can't argue that it's free trade if the trade involves sweatshop labor and slavery. We shouldn't be indulging in that. That's not a level playing field with our own workers. But I totally agree with you. International trade has always been an important part of
Mm.
the global economy. It raises global welfare because not all countries are endowed with the same advantages. I mean, if you want tropical fruit, you probably ought to import it. So, I'm not against international trade, but I am pro free trade, fair trade, and I think Trump and Biden actually are on this, and I think it's in the West.
Yeah.
We've really got to catch up. Britain has got to catch up because the
Mhm.
future will be a little bit. more protective, a little bit more awareness of our own industries. And strategically, that's important, Maya, because if you sell all of your steel production out and it's all closed down, you're strategically very vulnerable if there's a conflict.
I think the problem we've had for probably a century or so, and over the last few decades, is we started with the kind of Puritan protectionists, which was actually in the name of more proper socialistic types rather than
Mm,
SDP types, and that
mm,
didn't work. Then you had obviously William Gladstone, who I got a boss next to me, and of course there's some others
yeah,
tried to like bring some nuance into it. But then now, since then, we've gone fully what we will call the out of control globalist kind of neoliberal policies when it comes to economics and everything else. And the good thing I like about you and SDP's vision is you're not really Puritan. You don't want to completely shut down everything and a free market and free trade or
no,
free trade in general. But
I'll let you into a secret here. So I don't. My my concern about trade and the impact of trade deficits is mainly because I'm concerned about the welfare of the country. If you can
mm,
count, you can't run these large trade deficits without getting poorer each year. You will literally on. It's not on a theory. It's just
mm,
accounting. You own less and you owe more at the end of it. Maya, if I thought we could dominate the world
mm.
through free trade, I'd be a free trader.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, so yeah, I mean, obviously we could always have these debates in general, but the biggest problem we have is lack of cohesion and actually any sort of harmony or unity in the
Yeah,
country, which goes back to social policies, cultural policies, but it's not just social policy and cultural policy, it's also social and cultural behavior, attitude in the country.
yeah,
Not everything
yeah,
is top down. Not everything is actually imposed by the government. The
yeah,
government can't really force people to like start having babies. We can encourage people and incentivize, but again, people might argue at times because of mass migration. The rest of it is not just about mass migration, also in terms of education system. More selfishness is being taught, individualism, and I'm saying this as a more
yeah,
libertarian minded person. It's gone too far.
yeah.
And what are we going to do? Do we actually believe? Do we have anything that means this is Britishness? What is Britishness anymore?
Well, I mean, just as a point of fact, Britishness, British values change, and British values are whatever the British people think at the time. So
Yeah.
you only have to have a look at the British social attitudes surveys over the last, well, the post-war period, for instance. In the late 40s and 50s, massive majorities thought homosexuality was wrong.
Mhm.
We don't believe it anymore. I think that's a good thing that we've changed our view on that. But yeah, so you can't. I'm skeptical about people
Mhm.
saying, "Well, these are British values or these aren't." I think we are, as a country, we've been let down very, very badly by indifference and, frankly, recklessness over migration. I sometimes tease people when I'm debating them to explain the integration and assimilation policies that we have. We don't have any.
Yeah.
Right? We
We
don't
throw
have any.
money at it, but that's
It's a complete free for all. I mean, the diversity, inclusion, and equity stuff. We, as a party, we would get rid of all of those posts. They're divisive. They set people against each other. So that's exactly the opposite of what you should be doing. But we don't. We've never thought clearly about if you import very, very large communities, millions of people that are large enough basically to have their own culture, their own neighborhoods. You look at the northern towns, Blackburn, Burnley, Rochdale,
Rochdale.
yeah, they're highly segregated. One of the reasons for that is that the communities that come in are so big, they can really make their own sort of self-contained unit. Now, Britain has not had. It's interesting. Obviously, you have seen Sunak's speech, and we all watched that. Interesting speech. I think Sunak's a decent person. I don't dislike him, but I think he is quite misguided.
Yeah.
A couple of things didn't ring true. It's sort of great to try and deliver a community cohesion and integration speech
Mm.
when you just imported 1.4 million people gross and over three quarters of a million in the past year. That is reckless levels of immigration. You'll never get a sort of assimilation period or an integration pause to sort of find each other again and get to know each other a bit more. You'll never have that if you go on with immigration rates of that size. And the SDP propose an end to mass migration. I think we need to get back to the levels that we had 30 years ago, which were perfectly adequate to get skilled labour in that you needed. The importation of people, because you can't be bothered, let's face it, Maya, we can't be bothered to train our own nurses and clinicians. So you just go around and poaching them from West Africa. That is immoral. I mean, apart from anything else, it's utterly despicable to do that. I've worked in hospitals in Africa. I know exactly what the consequences of that are. And if you don't have nurses, if they're missing nurses, their inoculations don't take place. Kids die. So I describe it a bit like debt. It's mass migration has become a drug, and the real sort of globalist purists like Liz Truss, I think Rees Mogg's in the same boat actually. They just say bring it on, but you can't import millions of people without it having an effect on your own identity and culture in the long run. So I think we need a little bit of a time to train our own workers and to get to know each other.
Yes, and even to be fair, when it comes to migration policies, and well, you as a country being attractive enough or making it attractive for people, even if you do it slightly better, but if that's the policy, it's still wrong because if you have countries, developing countries, that need their own talent and brain to stay in the country, and you drain them,
Yeah.
this is like almost like imperialism reversed in a different way. Instead of us going there to basically take over, we are stealing their talent. So this is actually about the skilled labor and all that. Because
Mm.
obviously the problem you're just talking about is actually the mass immigration, which is actually combined with unskilled, skilled people who can't integrate, who don't want to integrate. But even if you do it too much with those who want to integrate, or very skilled as well, if that goes too much, then the developing countries will fail. And then, of course, they're going to have to go with sweatshops and everything else like that in order to survive. And then we wonder why there's complete chaos in the whole world. So I absolutely agree with
I
you on
think
that
you're
point.
right. I think that's basically a good summation of it. I think we need to roll our sleeves up and do slightly the harder thing, a bit long term thing, and train our own young people and even some old people pre retirement. Use our own labour force more, and then we won't have so many people on out of work benefits. It would improve things here, and we need to basically look after ourselves to a greater extent.
Yeah, Britain first. Apparently, it's controversial to say. What's going on? Because apart from the actual mainstream party platforms, we also talk about the corporate media. So the BBC, Sky News, and everybody else. Usually, the way the media works is they pay attention to parties or politicians or groups based on two things. If they can make it controversial and attack them. Two, if it's populist enough that they know that people will find it popular. SDP has policies when it comes to patriotism that's controversial for the media to attack. But you also
Mm.
have more populist or popular policies when it comes to economic protectionism. There are a lot of people basically, like I always say, people of this country basically just want to hang the pedos and fund the NHS,
Yeah.
social conservative and
True.
economically that way. But so why is it that you should be the bread and butter of the media? They're not giving you any attention. Not many people know still
Yeah.
out there about SDB's platform or the manifesto or anything else. What's going on? What do you think is going on?
It does take time. I think one of the things I've had to be realistic about from the start is that the staging posts of our progress are basically the general elections. And last general election, I mean, the 80s, as everyone knows, the party was very big.
Mm,
It was the biggest challenge to the two-party system in British
mm,
political. But we got very small, got kicked back to the grassroots, if you like. And in 2019, we only had 20 candidates in the general election. Next general election this year, we will have over 100. We'll have a party
mm,
election broadcast, and we'll get much more cut through. It is, you're quite right. I think in 6 years of being leader of the SDP, I've done five interviews on the BBC.
mm,
Talk TV, I'm on a lot, and in fact, the other day, we were on three times on Talk TV. Rod Little was on in the morning. Our wonderful candidate for London Mayor, Amy Gallagher, was on Julia Harley Brewer's show, and then I was on Mike Graham's later. And GB News, I'm on reasonably often. But no, it is difficult. I think the
mm.
long and the short of it is I don't think they like what we say very much.
Yeah,
And you're quite right to point out that I don't think the SDP has a policy that isn't supported by about half the public or
yeah.
even more.
Rightly or
So
wrongly, obviously, I disagree with some of them. Okay.
yeah, fine, but and that's I don't mind. I mean, in fact, you will hear me say I've said this many times before, and there's a reason why I say this.
Mm.
I say if you don't agree with us, don't vote for us.
Yeah,
Why?
fair.
Because plenty of people do. And
Yeah,
on the the sort of work that Matt Goodwin does on value divides,
yeah.
the SDP sits on top of about 55% of public opinion, and I don't think there's another party in the country that can say that.
That's true. Actually, this is what it is. It's electorally, it's a free market economy. You have to have the options instead of actually what you had. Actually, I remember the David Cameron politics, the coalition years. their policy essentially was to not give any voice or any sort of airtime to anybody who's what they would call extreme. So it could be from the left or right, and that becomes a problem because it creates a vacuum. Also, then black market will happen. You
Yeah,
actually the best thing to do if you actually give debates and everything else to everybody, then certain parties could actually create consensus. Some parties could actually then win the argument, and then people will be surprised, for example, how many people in the country might be the majority extremely liberal or extremely conservative. And I think
but
that people in the parties don't know that the Tories and Labour, they do focus groups, but they don't actually know the country.
no, that's quite right. You're absolutely spot on there. The paradox of this is that whilst the SDP speaks for the mainstream, just we are on opinion. Many of the liberals in charge of the establishment media are, you might call them alt liberals. I think we should all start calling them alt liberal because that's actually what they are.
Far liberals, sort of
They're
far right.
far liberals, yeah, whatever. But they're the ones that are out of touch. And if
Yeah.
you want to define, you can't define a mainstream opinion like, there's a simple majority, big majorities for reducing immigration. You can't describe that as an extreme of any kind. It's a mainstream opinion, just like Brexit was a mainstream opinion. But the people who control the media don't agree with this. I mean, they are actually in the minority.
That's a good point. Yeah, we are being ruled by the loud minority in general,
Yeah.
whether it's the media, whether it's the political class, or anything else like that. Thank you very much, William. Any last few words in terms of what SDP are up to?
Well, it's election season, so I'll just a couple of flags. So we're trying to take more seats off the Labour Party in Leeds. We've succeeded in that in the last 2 years. So I'm not taking anything for granted because beating Labour in the big cities and big constituencies of 30,000 is very difficult, but we've done it. I believe we're the only party to be doing that at the moment. So we're going to go for that. And the other flag up is as I say, Amy Gallagher's mayoral campaign. I think Sadiq Khan has been a disaster for the capital city. And I'm delighted to support her. I think she's a wonderful candidate, and I just hope people will get behind her and give her a big vote.
Ah, perfect. Thank you very much for coming on the show, and best of luck in the future.
Thank you. Cheers.